All right, we are live. This is going to be a training match with Playlionchess, who is a expert also, although he is a bit higher rated. And we can see here his bullet and blitz are a bit higher also, so this is perfect. It should be great training. I'm going to be playing some of my usual openings and some new openings, trying to mix it up. It will be an 8-game match. So the first 4 games will be 15 plus 2. And the next 4 games will be 3 plus 2. And we'll alternate colors as we go. All right. Hopefully you guys enjoy. I will be sending the first challenge in just under 2 minutes. When I do send the challenge, when I'm in the games, I will be doing limited commentary. I'll give my thoughts as they come, but I also want to make sure I'm still focused and do my best. Looks like everything is set up well here. So just under a minute and we will send this challenge. Get it set up here. Standard, real time. I'm going to make it rated. If he doesn't want it rated, he can let me know. 15 plus 2, that's already set. Looks like they've got a little bit of a new scroll bar here. And we'll send the challenge. And we're off. Okay, we've got black in the first game. And I did not look at any of his games beforehand. So I didn't look at any of his games. He's starting with d4. This is good. I wanted some d4, d5 practice. Part of the reason why I started to look for some training matches. And we're going to go with the simple declined here. Get some practice with some more positional chess. And here I can play e6. I can also play knight f6. I'm going to play knight f6 first, and then if he plays knight f3, then I'll play e6. And this is a pretty familiar position. Black chooses a really solid pawn structure. And I'm going to develop this knight to d7 because I know that's where it's going. I'm not sure yet where this bishop wants to be. It can go to e7 in some cases. It can go to d6. Now I'm going to have to commit something. So he blocked the bishop from going to g5. So I'm going to play the bishop to d6. I think that's objectively the best place for it. I often am hesitant to play it there. It always just feels a little bit loose, putting a piece on an undefended square. I think it's best. And then we're going to take this pawn with tempo. We were trying to play moves to make white run out of moves first, so that they had to move their light squared bishop, and then we get this extra move and develop with b5. Then we'll play bishop b7, and the idea is a6, castles, c5 at some point, play on the c file. He plays e4. He's threatening this fork right away, and I think I'm supposed to play e5 here. Both of our kings are still in the center, which is a little bit unusual, but it's nice to lock this pawn on e4 and block their bishop. And c5 is still an idea at some point. I just have to make sure I play a6 first. Okay, I'll go ahead and get castled. I don't want to capture here and invite that pawn push, so I'm going to leave that tension. In some of these positions, d5 is an option for white. Some of those lines get quite sharp. He might be thinking about capturing, might be thinking about pushing. Okay, I was going to say, or he might be thinking about just going bishop to g5 and pinning this knight. So here, maybe I play h6, bishop captures, queen captures. If he captures my knight, I don't really want to capture with my knight, because that leaves the e5 pawn less defended. So let's push his bishop back. Okay, so I still have the a6 option. Queen c7 is also an option. That defends the e5 pawn more. Rook e8, pretty natural option also. Gives my king the f8 square, defends e5. So what is white going to do next? He can capture. If I just recapture, he can push. If he pushes d5, I wonder if I want to have the option to push c5, in which case I would need to have a6 already played. If he pushes and I capture, and the knight captures, I can capture with my bishop. And that seems pretty good for me. All right, let's go ahead and guard this e-pawn again. Very even on time. Rapid chess is a tough time control for me. Part of why I want this practice. I'm doing a relatively good job of using my time so far, but I'm trying not to rush, but I also don't want to get under 2 minutes or anything like that. I tend to be at one extreme or the other. So I want to use my time consistently. Now you can see white has the better central control, but this bishop is blocked for the moment. These pawns could become weak. And black's managed to get all of their pieces developed. And this bishop is not great, but it also is not as bad as it could be in some cases. Okay, so now it looks like he's thinking about capturing and trying to open the d file towards my queen. So this makes me tempted to go ahead and play that queen c7 move I mentioned earlier and just get off the file. So queen c7, pawn takes, knight takes, that seems good. Yep. And with him using the a rook, it's going to take an extra move if he wants to put the rook on the c file and try and exert any pressure on my queen. But white's doing a good job of playing some moves that at least threaten the initiative. It's often that I get that triangle system and then I capture on c4 and I end up getting b5, c6, a6, bishop b7, rook c8, all in before white tries to do anything. Get all those moves in for free. You can see I'm really having to fight to get each of those moves in. He's not letting me just get my ideal setup. He plays d5. I do have to be careful because the b5 pawn can be loose, so I cannot push. And now that my queen's on c7, I have to be careful about capturing also. So if d5, I'm probably just going to play a6. If he wants to capture on c6, that should be fine for me. Oh, he goes for the capture on e5. So now I've got the choice to take with the knight or the bishop. The bishop will guard my knight a little bit better, but it does give him the chance to take the bishop pair. But I think we're kind of committed to that at this point. And then recapturing with the queen. Can't really put my queen on d6 to guard the knight. But I definitely don't want to allow bishop takes and pawn takes. Okay, and queen recaptures seems forced. f4 is an interesting move, but perhaps I can even play queen c5 check in that position and get out a lot of that danger. This pin no longer exists, so my knight, when he gets a chance, can move. We can see white has the majority on the king side, and I have the majority on the queen side with the 3 versus 2. a6 or rook c8. I think I need to play a6 because I need to be able to play c5 at the right moment. I'd also like this knight to get to the e5 square, which is making me consider the idea of queen to h5. This rook, even though I've talked about going to c8 this whole time, does have the ability to also go to d8 and contest that file. Okay, so he just hits the queen right away. Queen h5 does look interesting. Just got to make sure my queen doesn't get in trouble over there after something like bishop to e2. But I think my queen should be fine. Slow down for a second here. I don't really want to put my queen on c5 if I can help it, since I would like to push c5 at some point. My queen could obviously retreat, but that doesn't seem ideal either. And this seems awfully dangerous. So let's go over to h5. My queen is misplaced over here. Let's try and force white to prove it. If I can force him to trade this dark squared bishop for one of my knights, I could have some real kingside pressure here also. Perhaps the idea of queen g5 and the pawn to h4 was worth some more consideration also. f4, then queen c5. I don't know if allowing him to play f4 with tempo is good or bad for me. He definitely gets some space. Yeah, maybe f4 would have been good for him at some point. Thank you, Snoozy Singh. Thanks for stopping by. So if I can get rid of this dark squared bishop, maybe my knight can jump up. As I've said, this knight wants to occupy the e5 square. Still waiting to see where this rook is going to go. And c5 is going to need to be played at some point. I want to get this 3-on-2 majority going to create some counterplay, since I am the one that has less control over the center. And his bishop goes all the way back to f1. So really playing a defensive role. So initially my thought is knight e5. Let's get that guy going. Let's pause here. We've got a couple of extra minutes, so let's use it. Bishop captures, queen captures. And his rook can't infiltrate on the d file. My one concern here, though, is that the d file is the only open file. So it is the most important file. Another concern is that if I ever play c5, this knight is going to get a better square on d5 in some cases. So I've got to be careful about that. Where's my knight going after e5? Is it just there to blockade the pawn? Also, do I have ideas of knight c5 in trying to team up on this pawn? Okay, that's something I haven't considered yet. That looks quite interesting, knight c5. I think I would be happy if he has to play f3, I think. My knight would be pretty happy sitting on e6. My queen does guard it, so it's not completely loose. So let's see if they can kick my queen away. Knight c5, say bishop e2. And if I go back to something like queen to g6, does he have knight captures pawn? No, he'll lose the e-pawn in that case. So I could capture back his knight. He would take my knight, and then I would take his pawn. So if knight c5, f3, then maybe I reroute. I don't love putting this knight on e5 yet. I don't think. What about if I go to e5 if he just plays f4 right away? Is that a problem for me? My knight doesn't really want to be on c4 because that's going to really ruin my pawn structure. So I think knight c5 makes a lot of sense. But can he stop it? Should I just be getting this rook involved first? If I go rook to c8, then if there's ever those captures on b5, I'll actually be defending my knight at the end too. So rook c8 could make a lot of sense. Yeah, I think I like rook c8 first. Now white might be thinking about playing b4 trying to shut down my queenside pawns, but that pawn will definitely become weak in the long term. And I think I can just play c5 right there anyway. Seems like a very reasonable position so far. With the bishop pair, white probably has a slight edge. But black has no major weaknesses. Okay, so he plays f3. We talked briefly about that in response to knight c5, but he does it immediately. I'd be interested to see if he ends up playing bishop to f2 in the future. So do I just play c5 myself? The danger of c5, again, is giving up that control over the d5 square. Queen c5 check and then pushing the b pawn doesn't work because queen c5 check is going to be met by bishop to f2. There might be ideas of queen to g6. That puts a pin on this pawn and also opens the ideas of my knight trying to get in on the dark squares. But I've got to be really careful about this knight if I do that. So maybe this knight goes to e5, and if he doesn't trade, this knight comes back. To the king side. Got to decide if I want to trade rooks at any point. Okay, time is now even, but this is a critical moment here. Like to go after that dark squared bishop. I think knight e5 is needed. Otherwise, I'm just too worried about that knight being loose on the d7 square. Not really planning to go to c4 because I want to try and keep my pawn structure intact. At some point, I might just have to play c5 in order to get control over more squares and give up some control over the d5 square and say I will just trade if I need to. Perhaps something I should have already done. c5 is a thematic move in these positions to open up the bishop and to get control over d4. I guess I even have the idea of playing c5, knight back to c6, and then get onto the outpost of d4. That's interesting. That makes me think, yeah, oh, b3. I wasn't expecting that. Okay, he's controlling c4, but I think I'm going to... Yeah, we're going to go for c5 here. And look to see if I can use one of these weak squares. Did we learn anything from Reassess Your Chess, the chapter on knights that I read recently? I'm at least looking at those squares, so that's progress. So one thing I really wasn't sure about going into this match is at what point in the game we would run into time trouble. And it's looking like the middle game, well before the actual end game, we are both going to be getting into some time trouble. There's not a ton of tension in the position with pieces, so even if we get one traded pieces here, I'm not expecting the rest of the pieces to come off quickly. If white captures this knight and we recaptured the queen, we do lose the chance for this knight to get to these nice squares, but we also have gotten rid of white's bishop pair. This bishop is no longer nearly as bad as before. It is looking at this pawn and not doing a great job of creating threats, but it's fighting for the d5 square, and even though it looks kind of crazy, a well-timed f5 push could try to undermine this pawn chain. My opponent is now down under 2.5 minutes. We'll also see if I can avoid one of the biggest mistakes I make in over-the-board chess, is getting my opponents in time pressure and then playing in that time pressure myself instead of using my time. So let's see if I can use these extra 3 minutes on the clock to try and navigate the position. Okay, so queen f2. So now if I play knight back, my queen will be guarding the pawn. So that seems reasonable. So what's his idea with queen f2? I'm really not sure. It gets out of some targets, I guess. But I think I'm going to aim to get my knight to one of these outpost squares. And if he plays his knight in, I might just take it. I could also not take it. No, I probably should take it. Okay, his knight goes back. I wasn't expecting that. Okay, let's go after that a-pawn. We're also threatening this square. This knight is jumping around. I'm threatening to trap his rook. I'm threatening the a-pawn. And he's going after my queen. Did he trap my queen in response? Is my queen in trouble here? I'm not really sure. Let's figure it out. I guess I don't have the c5 square anymore. I do have this square. Where's his knight going next? His knight really can't attack anything. I don't see any good discoveries here. But I will admit that I overlooked knight f4. There are also ideas where I could attack his queen to create some more space for my queen, possibly. I'd probably lose some material there, but I think that would have saved me the queen. Okay, he's under a minute now, and we've got 4 minutes, so time to take a deep breath. He goes after our knight. Makes sense. Can't go in here and fork right now. Or here and fork, I mean. That square's guarded. Can't go to c2 right now. My knight's going to come backwards. And does he have a discovery yet? I don't see it. Maybe knight to d3 and going after the c5 pawn. Nope, he goes that way. Okay. I was thinking I would just back up and then capture the knight. I gotta be careful of forks there, though. What if I go back this way? Lots of forks to be careful of. His knight has found a better square than mine, it seems. At least for the moment. Here. 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 My queen's still in a little danger. But I want to stay attached to this. If I back up, then I'm not really threatening to take this knight because of forks. Maybe that's still the best, though. Ah, if I back up, he has knight to c7. All right, got to go this way. Tense first game. I'd like to be able to play knight to d4 to try and shut down that file. Okay, so he is going to be doubling my pawns, it looks like. Not really any way around that. He steals the c-pawn. So I got to create some activity. Discovery on the queen. Knight f3 threats. Okay, here I thought rook c2 maybe. Yeah, rook c2 looks like a good idea. All right, let's double on the c file. He's down under 10 seconds. I think just attack the queen. My knight's controlling a lot of good squares here. He's under time pressure. Okay. And do I have check? I can capture here with check. I can go here and attack the queen. Capturing there with check seems pretty strong. Or I could capture there with the rook. The pawn can't capture. Threatening a fork. He gets out of it. Okay. Oh, can't do that. Take the a-pawn. I'm down to 30 seconds. But I'm not sure what to do. Time scramble. On the bishop. Oh, wow. That was a great first game. That was a lot of fun. Hopefully he enjoyed it also. That went right down to the wire. Okay, I'll send the rematch, and yep, looks like he's already ready. We'll see if he accepts. Okay, game number 2. Make my first move. And I guess I'll update the match score. And I meant to play d4, but we'll play something fun here in this first rapid game as white. Take that. So d3 is a little bit unusual. It's a way that a lot of people decline gambits like the Smith-Morra. But in this Scotch setup, this is considered definitely better for white. But it puts them in a type of position that they weren't necessarily aiming for. And I find it to be pretty effective from the black side. Especially in blitz. You know, in slow time controls, I find it pretty easy to play against this d3 move. When faster time controls, not quite as much. One of the moves to remember to play is c4 in order to get the knight to c3, because that's where the knight typically wants to be. And this pawn that was pushed to c3 usually gets captured or captures on d4. And so having it stay on c3 is a bit of a hindrance. This takes away a lot of the tactics with queen b3, but white doesn't have any problems in this position. So white's going to develop normally, and at some point look for an e5 push likely. Bishop can go to f4 or to g5. There's no real pin on g5, so it's not super strong there. And it's nice to control this f4 square a little bit, because this knight tends to jump around. Wouldn't be surprised at all to see bishop g4 show up on the board soon. So it's one of those cases where I'm considering whether or not to push h3 preemptively. That does break a general rule, weakening our king side without the bishop being developed yet. But let's say I play something natural like rook e1, and he goes bishop g4. I've got to worry about his knight jumping into both of these squares. Yeah, I think I'm going to play h3. I can prevent him from jumping in one or the other, but not from both. Excuse me. This knight might also jump into the d5 square. That's a common idea. Or after the e5 push, jump to the e4 square. Knight b5, not super strong in these positions because the c7 square is not weak as long as the queen's still there. So this knight definitely wants to be improved at some point. This rook we're kind of waiting on. It could go to the c file. It could go to the d file. In many Scotch positions, it can go to the b file, though we have not had a capture by a bishop on this square, so the b file is not half open. There's some positions where it might even come all the way over to the e file. So we're just going to try and use this slight time advantage we have so far. Okay, so he goes ahead and plays knight e5 anyway. If I capture the knight, then he's going to recapture with his e-pawn, open up this bishop a bit. Close down my bishop. So I think I want to keep my bishop, of course. So my choices are the capture or retreat my bishop. Well, is my bishop really doing anything on d3? Not particularly. I probably would be doing more on f3. So maybe bishop e2 makes a lot of sense. Trying to work on keeping the tension, only relieving if I need to. I don't see what I concretely gain by capturing this knight. Right, pawn takes, and then what? My bishop's still on a weird square, so let's just back it up. Now perhaps there are more ideas of the bishop going to f4. Also e3, yeah. I'm just kind of waiting on this bishop because I'm not sure which square to put it on. So I'm hoping that black does something that gives this bishop direction. Alright, so his queen might be coming out this way. I don't think he's playing for d5, but let's do some counting here. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yep, I still control d5 enough. d6 is a little bit weaker now, which tells me that queen or bishop to f4 makes a little more sense. So let's go bishop f4. We are threatening to simply capture on e5 and win a pawn. I wouldn't be surprised if he exchanges on f3. But I like the position here. No fireworks in the position, but just kind of a bind. Maroczy type bind with the pawns on c4 and e4 controlling the d5 pawn break, and black really doesn't have any other pawn breaks. We'll just pre-move that. This also gives some direction to this rook. I should move my queen off the d file and get this rook to the d file, or this rook to the d file sometime soon. Okay, so he's hitting my bishop. I want to stay on that diagonal. G6 or h2 is the big question. If I go back to g3, I do invite another tempo with the knight, but then I back up again. And then he might get a knight into f4 with that extra tempo. So I'm going to back all the way up to h2. Just so knight h5 doesn't happen with tempo. Maybe I just meet it with an immediate e5. I think he's really trying to chase down this light square bishop. And so that idea of getting a knight into f4 and going after my bishop makes sense. It also tells me that I should probably play rook e1 so that I can play bishop f1 and try and keep those bishops as long as possible. Okay, so he moves there in anticipation for the e5 push, probably. Maybe rook f8 coming up. So I'm thinking queen to c7. That way my rook can come to the d file. I think I managed to get the match link posted to Twitter, so that would be a success. I'm usually pretty bad about posting about the streams. So earlier in the back of my head, I was thinking, do I have to worry about b5? But I don't think so. I would sack a pawn for black, but his queen side's not developed yet, so he can't really take advantage of any of the additional open files. If I was queenside castled, then I would expect that much more likely. Okay, and here I'm just thinking rook over. Which rook, though? Maybe the e rook. No, I think the e rook probably belongs on the e1 square. Maybe not. Because there might be tactics on that diagonal. I'm not sure if this pawn trade is good for me or not. So I'm looking at rook e d1. If the bishop backs up, he has two attackers on this pawn. I can capture. He can capture. I mean, intuitively, it seems like that resulting position should be good for white, but I don't see it exactly. I don't think his queen's doing too much over there. I guess it is helping to stop e5. E5, pawn takes. Got 1, 2, 3 defenders. There's not enough attackers. Real question is rook d1, bishop f8, and then what? Then, yeah, he doesn't actually have any problems on the back rank because of the queen still. So, I go rook e1 and say that I don't have problems with that rook. Guess my knight's always defending it. Rook e1 seems a bit more principled. I should be able to increase pressure on d6. Let's see. Is he threatening to play d5, though? So rook e1, d5, pawn takes, pawn takes, pawn takes, knight takes, knight takes. He is. Okay. So there is a threat of playing d5 right now. So rook over, bishop back. But can I meet d5 just by pushing the e pawn? So rook e1, d5, and I just push. Push, I'm on his knight. If his knight jumps in. Then I take. I don't know. This is definitely a key moment here. Ideas of d5, ideas of opening an attack on my e-pawn. I think I need an accurate move here. Rook e1, d5, capture, 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 knight captures. Right, so rook e1, d5, captures. Pawn captures, knight captures, knight captures, queen captures, rook hits queen. Yeah, I was hoping I'd have some kind of tactic on the e8 square, but I don't think so. So, okay, rook e1. Well, let's go rook e1. If he plays d5, I can then decide if I'm going to capture or push. I shouldn't be worse in those positions, but I felt like I needed to play accurately there to maintain my advantage, and I'm not sure if my rook belongs on e1 or d1. Okay, not a move I expected. Just trying to control the e5 square more, it looks like. Guess that makes sense. So rook to d1, one of his knights to e5. Capture, knight takes. Yeah, but I feel like I'm just playing f4 there and trying to open things up. Opening the position should be good for me. All right, let's try and save some time for the resulting complications here. Knight goes to e5, capture once and play f4 is my idea, and then play e5. This will also free up some squares for my light square bishop. He can put his knight on c5, but I'm not worried about that. Thank you for the follow. Eyelash Chess. Knight c5. Maybe I just push anyway. I want to open it up. All of my pieces are on as good of a square as they're going to get. E2 bishop, not the best square, but I can't really improve it. I think my best chance of improving it is by moving this knight and getting it out on that diagonal. So to do that, I'm going to have to open things up anyway. One option I haven't discussed yet is he moves a knight here, and I move a knight into d4. And then play for f5? Okay. Or f4, f5? f4, e5? So do I capture? Or do I move my knight and then play f4? Whose knight's going to be better in that resulting position? Probably mine. I capture, and then I play f4. His knight's just going to go back. Yeah, this knight doesn't have a good square to go to if I kick it with this knight still here. So let's keep that tension on the board. Okay, and now I'm looking at f4. Trying to convince myself a reason not to play it. It just looks good. Not worried about any of these pins. I should have no trouble getting out of those. Okay, now the question is, do I play a3 with the idea of trying to fork if he goes to the c5 square? Or do I go ahead with f5 right now? f5 gives him this square back. e5, not sure if we're ready for that. Knight f5 looks great. Too many good options. All right, let's play this. Just limit his knight. Force him to figure out how to untangle here. f4 is a very unusual move for me to play. I tend to really resist pushing my f-pawn. I'm always worried about that diagonal, even though I like messy positions. I tend to play for the e5 pawn break, and that's it. Okay, so now if I push, of course, the queen can capture, but I wanted to stop the knight from going to c5. King h1 before all of this starts? Is that necessary? Is that too prophylactic? Knight back to f3 is another option, of course. Looking to get that d6 pawn. So, knight here. Queen back. Do I just try and win the pawn? Yeah, looks pretty smart to do it that way. Bishop f3 is something I mentioned earlier, but the move knight to h4 looks kind of annoying there. So I want to wait until bishop f3, knight h4, and I have something there that looks convincing. At least for now, my bishop's not terribly in the way. Maybe it'll even sit on g4. So we can save the pawn with queen c7, but then maybe a simple move like moving my queen over will be enough to try to win the pawn. He could also throw in queen b6 check. I'm simply going to put my king on h1 and say he's safe. Time is close again. And we're getting under time pressure basically at the same point as last game. Okay, he says he's not going to try to save the pawn. He's going after the e4 pawn. It's guarded already. I capture. Bishop captures. Rook captures. I win a pawn. I win a pawn. It seems like that's all there is to it. Get rid of that dark squared bishop. e5 coming in maybe. That was not all there was to it. So queen c5 check is not a move I ever mentioned at all. All I talked about was queen b6 check. But it looks like queen c5 is a problem here. Any tricks? Well, I guess I do get some material right back, so it's probably worth playing a little bit. I can fork right away, or I can go for the discovery. Discovery is not as strong, the knight can block, so we'll go for the fork. Yeah, it was interesting that queen c5 check never even crossed my mind. I looked at queen b6 check, and that was it. Knight. Yeah, we gotta take the knight. Gotta take the knight. Then do we attack the queen again? Let's do that. But I'm just down the exchange now. Down the exchange for not really any compensation. Still worth playing. Guess I gotta go right back. This rook being pinned is a real issue here. So I'm trying to guard my bishop with the knight so that my rook can go to the d file or the f file maybe. Just thinking f1 to help support this pawn a little bit more. But then I'm not sure where this bishop's going. I can go to d1 and then bishop f3, but then I'm likely losing the f4 pawn also. I could also go bishop to g3 and threaten some kind of discovery. Let's do that. We got to play for tricks when we're down this much material. Gotta play for tricks when our opponent's under 2 minutes. Just always have to play for tricks. Interesting. Is he going to give up the queen for the rook and the bishop, or is he going to go back? Go back anywhere on that diagonal, I guess. We'll pre-move this. But I'm expecting him to retreat along the long diagonal, and then I have to avoid the rook trade. Yep. Bishop pair. Anything can happen. Guess we'll go back to the F file. I'm not sure. I want to keep the rooks on the board, but there's not a great way to do it. This knight needs to find a better square. Like the G5 square or something, maybe. Go to E4. Yeah, I guess E4 makes sense. Okay, let's go this way. Well, I wouldn't mind my knight getting to the D6 square. He's down to 30 seconds. Attack the knight. Maybe it's pinned. Keep things messy. We're both down to 10 seconds. I can grab a pawn whenever I want. Oh, ran out of time. I was thinking about taking the knight, but I was out of time, and I'm clearly losing in this position. Still could have played a little bit better right there at the end. Oh, man. Okay. Jumping into game number 3 now. Let's see what he plays. We'll update the match score. It's now 1-1. Another good game. Okay, he's playing E4 this time. What do I want to play? Let's play the Scandinavian. I don't play it often, but I don't want to play a French today. At least not at this point. I'm going to keep mixing it up. Get new positions I can try and learn from. I like that the first 2 games had a lot of maneuvering, so not my typical style. I'm trying to aim for that again. Get lots of practice in openings I'm not as good at. All right, well, knight f6 has to make sense here. But I can't pretend to know this very well. Okay, I think bishop g4 makes sense. Often we'll even be giving up that bishop for the knight, I think. e6. I'm going to base all of this off of some very general principles from watching John Bartholomew play. Though I can't think really what he's done against the move d4, since knight c3 is certainly more common. But one thing he was saying recently is about not playing c6 in a lot of positions. Though I guess those were queen a5 positions. This doesn't feel quite the same. I am throwing this check. He blocks with the bishop, and then there's nothing there. So let's come all the way back home. One of the tricks is figuring out what to do with this bishop, because it has several nice options. I'm guessing not b4. General principle is that usually your bishops don't want to be on the same rank. Of course, there are lots of exceptions, but if your bishop has somewhere else to go, it's often better on a different rank. Avoids a lot of tactics, and they tend to work better that way. See, that makes me more tempted to play the bishop there, just because the pin could be meaningful. But I'm going to say no. I'm actually going to just play... Am I going to play c6? I'll play c6. Just keep his knight out of b5 for now. Control the d5 square a little bit better. Knight's going here. Bishop's going somewhere. Queen's going somewhere. Playing a little bit of reaction chess here. Waiting to see what white does. We do have a nice little time edge already. And both games have come right down to a time scramble. Okay, so do I take that bishop or that knight with my bishop? I'm thinking probably. Yeah, I think so. I'm going to play the bishop to e7 just to block the e-file. So if he does try and force through the d5 move, that I don't run into immediate checks or anything like that. If d5... And it looks like he can trade everything if he wants. But I think I should be safe after kingside castling. I might run into a case where I have A and C pawns versus A and B pawns. I might have to play a little defense against that weakness. But a lot of pieces would be coming off the board in that case. Mo is certainly going to go kingside. Although he hasn't committed his king. So if he starts playing something like g4 here, we might have to reconsider. Okay. Here's kingside. Let's castle. I'm I'm going to develop this knight soon, I promise. The ideas of knight a6 and back to c7, I guess they don't hold a lot of merit in this exact position, but let's see some interest in that. See that in sometimes the king's Indian positions. Also sometimes see that with the white pieces. It's actually recently going over a Hikaru Nakamura versus Alexander Onishik game from the 2015 U.S. Championships. And that's how Hikaru got his knight developed. Black's rook happened to be on c2, so it was with tempo. But that knight a3 move popping up in my recent study. So the bishop to e3 kind of stops black from playing queen b6, I think, in a lot of cases, because d5 would come with tempo on the queen. And I don't think black wants to go after that pawn. But maybe that's a case where black is supposed to just be greedy. Now we reach a position where white has more space, but black's solid, and what to do next. Queen c7 looks pretty natural. We'll do that. And maybe a6 or h6. A6 with the idea of perhaps playing c5 at some point. Definitely weaken some of black's queenside squares. But c6 or e5 are really our only breaks in this position. So maybe we go to e5 right now. Or are we ready for a pawn break? Perhaps not. Rook c8 first. So if I play e5 and he plays d5, does my pawn advance all the way to e4? Okay, let's play a6. Control that b5 square. I just see some situation where this pawn needs to capture or move, and suddenly I get hit with an extra tempo. So let's avoid that. And I just got to be a little careful about this knight trying to jump into one of these squares later on. My knight is guarding the g4 square for the moment. One issue if I ever do play e5 is that there could be problems on that diagonal. So I've got to be aware of that. Think in positions where I push, he pushes, and I push again. Although in this current position, I would just lose a pawn because of that. Okay, he's backing his queen way up. He really wants to open that c file and get this rook towards my queen. So e5, d5, I think is the issue. And if I push c5, then d5. Is that less of an issue? Might get a really weird pawn structure if I play e5 then. Keep his knight out. Yeah, c5 seems like a better option right now. And c5, if he captures, the c file stays closed. So c5, d5. Yeah, it looks interesting. And if I can prevent the c file from opening, then queen b1 almost certainly was a wasted move. Five-minute time advantage, so getting large here. And just like the last two games, I want it to get smaller as it runs down and I use my time. I don't want to lose with 6 minutes advantage on the clock. Last game I had a time edge and I used it to continue with a reasonable position and ended up losing. But I think the way I did it was okay. I'm going to play e5. It looks really strange. It is really strange. Maybe even the bishop goes to d6. I don't know. But this keeps all the files closed, and I think that is what black wants here. We want a more closed position. We don't have the bishop pair, and these files look a little more under white's control. I don't see how he wins any material with this pawn push. I have that square under pretty good control for the moment. And I'm thinking if he plays knight e4, I exchange it and just play g6. Weak dark squares. But I might have to do that and just move my rook and play bishop f8. Plays knight e4. I don't think I can let him keep his knight there because of his additional control over the d6 square. So we'll have to capture his knight, play g6, and see what happens. King h1. That wasn't expected. Snoozy Singh, thank you for the follow. I appreciate it. Okay, so king to h1. Is he just going to try and push those pawns down the board? If so, I'm not going to have a great response to it. But rook e8 seems like a very practical move. I'm going to need to play it anyway. At some point, regardless of what happens. I could go to d8, but I kind of like the idea of going to e8 and being able to push e4 to close that diagonal at some point. Let's do it. If I could just get this kind of setup, that would be pretty nice. Then we might even be winning. But this bishop's going to have a hard time getting onto this diagonal. And I'm not even sure it wants to be on that diagonal, because it might be needed on the king side for defense. Yep, and he goes for g4. Okay, so this is what I was saying. My bishop should go somewhere. Maybe d6. But what am I going to do if he pushes g5? I guess that's the immediate threat. e5. There's a lot to calculate all of a sudden. e4. Takes. Okay, that looks kind of interesting. So bishop d6, he pushes g5, I push e4. And I'm trying to say that his king is going to be more in danger than mine. He captures, I capture. I think it's probably true. Bishop d6, g5, e4. Okay. Let's say knight captures. Knight captures. Bishop captures. Bishop here. Bishop captures, probably the same thing. Knight captures, knight captures. Okay, what other options I have before we get too carried away? So that's one way that I definitely saved my knight. H6 looks bad. Looks like that's just too easy for him to play g5 anyway in a lot of cases. I don't want to move this rook again. Just moved it. So the other option would be like knight f8, which looks like a solid defensive move. But then my other knight's going to go to d7, and I'm just kind of sitting there hoping I don't get checkmated. So I don't love that. Going for it. So g5, e4, bishop goes back. I get to play knight h5. Bishop goes back this way. I thought that should still be good for me, even if he ends up getting my knight. I felt like his king should be in far more danger than mine. And that's what we're going to bank on. Because I think having my knights on f8 and d7 is basically being down a piece anyway. So I think he can get my knight, but only if he makes his king side really weak. His bishop ends up on e2. If he wants to get a king side attack, I think he has to let me keep the knight. Okay, we'll go here. Yep, and he just takes it right away, as expected. Okay, I'm going to capture here. And then here, I talked about maybe bishop here. But now I'm seeing h7 is under some duress. So maybe I push. My knight's going to be getting to this square. This seems reasonable. Yeah, so he didn't even look like he considered bishop e2 trying to keep the piece. Now the bishop goes back. Okay, so now my knight needs to start finding some squares. So I was looking at bishop here. And if the queen or rook defense, the queen defense, gotta be a little careful if I play knight e5 though. Yeah, I think bishop here is good. We'll wait on knight e5. Pawn push, bishop captures. Something guards the bishop. I capture once and then move my queen. Okay. In my head, I could do this. Bishop captures, and he's going to play queen here. And then what? So maybe I couldn't do that. Bishop captures, queen d3. Bishop captures, queen d3. My bishop can't really go anywhere with tempo. Fair enough. Well, we gotta get the pawn forward at least. So knight, that doesn't really attack anything. I guess I do have rook here that guards the bishop. All right, let's play that. Okay, I saw this move. Knight attack. Knight attack, queen retreats. Yeah, I guess I'm always going to lose a pawn in those cases, but being down a pawn is not the end of the world. Takes my rook, I take his queen. Retreat. Play my rook over to defend more. He can win the pawn by capturing here and then capturing my bishop. Oh, actually he can't. Bishop takes, knight takes, and I guard my bishop. Ooh, maybe I'm not losing any material here. That would be a nice change. This bishop could be loose in a lot of cases. Knight here, try and shut down the file. Okay, he guards the f-pawn. Do I double up and try and go after his bishop? Oh, that seems so risky. But where's his bishop go, actually? Bishop takes, rook takes. Okay. He says no. Okay, now he's not threatening to win my bishop anymore. So what else can we do here? I'd like to get rid of this light squared bishop, really. Alright, let's go back and line up with his queen. Put the pressure on him, since he's lower on time. Okay, he stops my knight idea right away. Try and line up with that queen again. Maybe bring our knight back and attack the bishop. He's trying to get on the dark squares and go after our king. Makes sense. Maybe my knight belongs on f5 now. Wouldn't be surprised if queen f6, but then I think I get knight f5 in and I guard everything. Okay, so he brings it back. Good square for a knight. Rook trade. If everything trades, I'm not sure how this pans out. If I control the E file, maybe I can infiltrate. Okay, so he's doing that. I'll go back. Waiting for a fork to pop up for this knight. It's a strong knight. Okay, so he defends that. What do you know? Guards the back rank. Also, I can move my knight and eye that h3 pawn. He's under 30 seconds. Trying to create threats. Ask him questions, force him to answer. Yep, that makes sense. Knight there is probably just still a good move. Threatens another fork. So many forks. So little time. 5 seconds left. He can throw in the rook here. I take, and my king should be safe. I get this check-in now because the pawn's pinned. Let's see what that means. Maybe nothing. Okay, at the very least, I'm trading queens. Is there more? Doesn't look like it. Okay, we'll trade queens. Guard my rook, so he doesn't have bishop takes pawn check. Get out of some checks. Okay, just make sure my bishop's not loose. Okay, rook here. Guard the b pawn so I can move my knight. Go after his bishop. Put my knight on f5 if needed. Kind of bouncing around here. Oh, and I won on time. Wasn't even the goal. I was trying to get my knight to a better square. But, wow. Okay. There we go. That is 3 games. And we have one more. So we'll update the match score here. It's now 2-1. All right, and he's going to go ahead and take a short break. I'm going to mute myself and get a drink. Okay, so we have one more game in the rapid section, and then we're supposed to have 4 3+2 games. So in this next game, I'm going to have the white pieces. I'm going to try and mix it up again. I'd like to get a different opening each game in the rapid section. Let's just scroll back a little bit here. I want to see that moment when he had us pinned up, if there was anything better for him. So this is when it looked pretty dangerous. Plays there. So we defended. And he attacked our rook, which closed the file a bit. Was there something better? Maybe the queen comes in and just tries to win a pawn. I don't know. I don't want to open the analysis board, though. Don't want to turn on the engine. Because I want to go over these games later. Maybe tomorrow. And try and learn from them before I see the evaluations. Okay, so he played bishop to d5, which makes sense. Trying to get rid of that rook. Maybe my knight e5 move just works. What if he just captures right there? Then what? Captures right there. I recapture. Ah, that's right. I'm going to pick up this bishop at the end. Okay, so all of that made sense. My knight got to a good square. So my knight got to a good square in 2 different games. And I spent time yesterday and today reading about the knight chapter in Reassess Your Chess. Although I didn't do very well on the test problems. Maybe I learned something. Okay, this still all made sense, although he did get the file here. So maybe I shouldn't be trading there. Okay, he's back. He's ready for game number 4. Here we go. And d4. As I said, mixing it up. As I mentioned before, I don't have any idea what he plays. So, not sure what to expect here. So it looks like he plays the Grunfeld or something of that sort. And I've never faced it as white. Played it a couple times casually as black, but never faced it as white. But I guess we'll take it head on. We'll take the center and see what happens. So I think it's pretty normal for knight takes, e4, knight takes knight, he takes, and then he's going to try and play on that long diagonal. And I'm guessing I want to try and find a time to play rook b1. I think queen b3 at some point is a pretty normal move. Maybe even this early? Is it too early to play queen b3? I feel like 8 queen b3 is a move I've heard of. Bishop d3 looks natural. Bishop g4 looks kind of annoying already, which I'm guessing why queen b3 would be a consideration. Bishop c4 seems like it would be pretty normal. c5 is a move I'm expecting to show up at some point. Bishop e2 seems normal. Queen c2 seems normal. Bishop e3. So does my rook want to be on b1 or c1? I guess that's another question. Definitely doesn't want to stay on a1 forever. All right, I'm just going to play queen b3 now. I don't know the opening, so I'm going to just try to go with what makes sense. This gets out of the pin here. It guards the c-pawn. It gets out of possible pins here. Slows down the development of this bishop. Now I gotta be a little careful about bishop d3 because that would be an undefended piece. There could be some tactics with c5 or e5. Maybe the bishop's just going to e2. Now if he develops his bishop, like let's say he plays something like bishop to, okay, he goes c5 right away. Say if he goes bishop e6, do I have to be careful? I don't know. Okay, bishop e3. Keep it simple. Maybe this rook belongs on d1. That could make a lot of sense. Yeah, here we are, just a couple moves into the game, already with a position that I've never played before. And since I haven't played it before, I've probably messed it up, which means it's probably a position he hasn't played before either. Queen A5, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so now I'm thinking rook D1 to guard the D pawn. Or bishop E2 just to castle. Bishop E2. Rook D8. Okay, well, let's look if he captures first. Bishop E2 captures. Bishop captures? Do I want to trade bishops? Probably. And that looks reasonable. Bishop E2, rook D8, castles. Oops. Castles, then captures, bishop captures, out of the pin. Okay, so bishop E2 definitely makes sense. Bishop C4 is probably worth considering. It does control that E6 square, but bishop C4, B5 looks a little annoying to deal with. So bishop E2 it is. Trying to keep things simple. I want to castle to get out of the pin, and then try and get both rooks active. Okay, and here I wanted to take with the bishop, because I want to trade dark squared bishop, since that's his best piece. Okay, and E5 I should be happy with in theory. He wants to move this rook anyway, so I don't think putting it on C5 makes much sense, unless I'm going to go C5 and bring it back to the B4 square and hit his queen. That could make some sense. That looks actually quite annoying for him. So bishop here. Oh, wait. His queen's just attacking that square already. Settle down there, Michael. Bring that back. I think my c-pawn should be pretty safe. Even if he gets a rook on that file, I should be able to guard it or even push it to keep it defended. Just don't want to get castled to get out of a lot of these potential issues. I don't have the huge center that I'm probably supposed to have. So I'm not sure if this is considered a success for black or not. He doesn't have a bishop that's quite as good as usual in these types of fianchettoed positions. Yeah, I don't think I can get away with going queenside. I don't think there's any advantage of that. I was thinking if I could get a rook to d1 right away. Okay, he just attacks my queen. Makes sense. I was thinking queen c2, but maybe I don't even want to be on the c file. Or I could just go and grab the b pawn right now. What happens if I do that? He takes the c pawn. So that looks too dangerous. All right, let's drop back to this square or C2. I think B2, just so I'm not on the C file. Because I'm expecting something like the rook to come over. Oops. But I'm definitely running into some issues with these queenside pawns. Because if the rook comes over, I actually can't play there. Yeah, I've got to play the bishop back. So that feels pretty awkward. But perhaps I can play C4 with tempo at some point. Little discovery on the queen. I wonder if he's looking at bishop C4. That could be a strong idea for him. Plays the knight out. Let's get our king castled. I think I might have been able to take the B pawn, but that looks very risky. Actually, I think my queen just gets trapped there after rook A, B8. So couldn't take it yet. But it's his queen almost getting trapped. If I go like rook F to B1, he plays B6, and I push the pawn. No, I guess not quite. Let's go after the B pawn anyway. B6, bishop B5. But C4 doesn't look like it's ever actually doing anything. Okay, do I want to trade rooks here? Or trade queens? Maybe. Maybe I do. Yeah, I think I might. Let's go for the queen trade here. The e5 pawn isn't really weak. Even if my rook recaptures, I don't have a good way to keep my rook there on the pawn and dislodge his knight. So I could also capture with my bishop, but I think I run into the same issue. I can dislodge his knight, but I can't get a second attacker on this pawn. If I ever push the c pawn, then his knight's going to have better squares. Definitely feels like a better position for black here. Okay, he keeps the queens on, though. A little surprising. Maybe he just wants to try to win this c-pawn. Is this pawn weak? Not as long as his knight's there. Okay, so what's the next step for my queen? Well, let's improve my bishop. And I think even if I end up losing this c-pawn, that's probably not a huge deal if I get some activity for it. It feels like I'm eventually going to lose it anyway. All right, so he's going back to the D file. He's not going after the C pawn. Maybe he's trying to get in here. Not worried about the D1 square at the moment. What can I do about this A7 pawn? How can I get at that? I want to trade rooks? Maybe. Maybe I want to move the A-pawn. I'm going to move the A-pawn once. Just to get out of the range of this bishop. I guess this is preventing my queen from going back to D3 since he controls the D file. So maybe I do need to play rook D1 to contest it. Thank you for the subscription. So contesting the file seems like it would make sense. If I can get some of the heavy pieces off the board, it should be harder to target my isolated pawns. Which is why I kind of went for that queen trade to begin with. His queen on C7 is doing a good job supporting that E5 pawn. So it's going to be tough for me to get that. But as long as I'm controlling all these entry squares, I don't see how he makes progress yet. I'm just going to kind of play to force him to find a way to make progress. And try not to create any additional weaknesses for myself. Maybe even queen A4 to threaten the bishop. Maybe that's what I should have done last move. Yeah, he's trying to go after this right away. If I go queen a4, threatening to win the pawn. If he pushes the pawn, I still have bishop to d6. So let's drop this queen back. It wants to get off of b5 anyway, because I think my bishop would rather be there. We do have a time edge again. Okay, so he plays b6, and I felt like that was a concession by him. I was thinking I could try and play for c5 then. Maybe. Yeah, let's play c4. And maybe I'll put my rook on the c file and line up with his queen next. Okay, he just goes right back. Okay, now I can play c5 though. Knight takes, pawn takes, bishop takes. Okay. Interesting. So if bishop takes, pawn takes, knight takes, pawn takes. 1, 2, 3 defenders, 3 attackers. Okay, fair enough. After my first capture, I can throw in c takes b6, since I would be on the queen. So bishop takes, pawn takes. Capture on the queen. Knight takes. I don't know which piece I want to have after, the knight or the bishop. I can't capture on b6 first because he'll take with check. I could also move this bishop, but I don't think that's good. I guess I should have the bishop afterwards. And then I'll try to come back this way maybe. Also like to go that way. But we'll have to wait on that. Go like this. Probably a rook to the c file next. Oh, okay. It's going to keep pushing. All right, to f3 it is. Ah, he's on my rook. I missed that. So now he's got to decide whether or not he wants to trade for my rook. And he says no. At least not yet. Yeah, looks like I gotta trade queens. Not ideal. And my bishop's hanging at the end. Yep, good game by him. Well played. Got that weak c pawn at the beginning, and things never improved. All right, so that's the end of our rapid games. So now we've got 4 games of Blitz. So I'll go ahead and send him a challenge there. This is going to be 3-2. Random colors. And here we go. 4 games of 3 plus 2. And we'll play a French now that we're playing some Blitz. Okay, we're going to get some kind of poison pawn game, perhaps. We are. Is he going to take it? All theories so far. He does. Okay, he's pausing here. It's really only one move in this position, so interesting place to pause. I'm going to try and build up on the c file. My rook's going to come to c8. Maybe queenside castle. Bishop's going to go to d7, and then either to c6 or the a4 square. Draw some arrows for you guys. And then we're going to just try and keep pressure on the king. All right, there we go. That's the main move. Capture there. Queen d3, pretty much expected. And we're going to play the bishop d7 line. Here you can capture with the queen or the knight. As he doesn't have to capture it all. Okay, and in this case, I'll go ahead and play my rook to c8 right away. I think knight f5 and then d4. Okay, so he just gets out of all of that. In which case, I think knight a5 makes sense. And we're looking at that c4 square. We're also on c2. Okay, let's just jump into c4. It's a good square. Let's not overthink things at this point. Queen c5 looks good, I think. Could also go, no, can't go bishop there. Yeah, queen c5 looks good. If he takes the b pawn, I should be able to just play bishop c6 at the very least. And now if he attacks my knight, I can even jump right in to the e3 square. Okay, interesting. I guess we'll capture there. See how he retakes. Gonna be another time scramble. So queen a5 is definitely possible soon. Want to keep the queens on the board. Knight takes a3, and I've got pressure on the c3 pawn. Wow, and he actually does take it. I didn't think he was going to, but he did. Okay, is that rook going to be trapped now? Knight b6 and bishop c6. How does his rook get out here? By trying to force a queen trade. Oh. Still time scramble time. Run, king, run. Oh, that's check. Yeah, in trouble now. Did not play that endgame well in the time pressure. All right, let's see if I can get my rook more active. Yeah, nope, this isn't going to work. Nice game by him. Very close. But that's a tough end game to play under time pressure. So let's see what we can do from the white side here. Sicilian this time, okay. We just go back here. And here. And we got a weird position. I don't know if I thought I was supposed to go bishop g5 and get chased around, but it's been a long time since I played that. Okay, that feels good for me. Wasn't a good way to defend that pawn. If I played bishop f3, they were going to push g4. I've got the bishop pair, so opening things up should make sense. Jumps in there. Okay. I'm going to take here. Not the best pawn structure ever for either of us. And I'll look to bring my rook to the d file maybe. What's he going to do with his king? Brings his rook to the d file. Okay. I don't think I'm worried about my c pawn. Maybe I should be, but I'm not. Castle kingside, queen a6. Queen captures, maybe rook d3 first, and even double on the d file. Up close to a minute. So we'll see if we can use this minute. All right, he takes it. Takes the pawn. All right, let's attack the queen like this. Thinking maybe even I can play rook e1 and go after e7. Now I'm threatening bishop takes c6. If he castles, I can take the bishop. I think I definitely have compensation for the pawn at the moment. If I go bishop h5, that looks annoying. Could also just go bishop g4, bishop g4, e6, bishop g4, e6, and I can go back. Okay, so let's attack the bishop. He can't play f5 because of bishop h5, and then we go right back and hit the pawn again. King e7, queen e5. With the idea of going to c5 next. Okay, now we're just up a piece. All right. Didn't update the score yet, but it is actually 3-3. And, oh, I was going to play a Sicilian, but I guess not. No time for a Sicilian, okay? Let's get bishop f5 out early, since there's no ideas of queen b3 here. Just get in a nice solid position. And rook to the c file makes sense. And I think I want to play c5 at some point, even though it looks weird. I think it's thematic. Now I've got to be careful that I don't take with the knight and get forked with the e4 at some point. Two games left in the match. He can give me an isolated pawn here. I'm going to take with the knight. No, I'm not. Yes, I am. I'm going to take with the knight. So with the isolated pawn, which is really our first isolated pawn of the night, of the evening, I want to try to keep the minor pieces on and try to create some attacking chances. So this looks like a good move. I'm pretty happy to trade the major pieces. Where's his knight going? It goes to b5. I'm going to play bishop all the way back to b8. The only downside of this situation is that his bishop has improved a lot. I'm kind of surprised how eager he is to trade these pieces. But maybe my isolated pawn will prove to be quite weak. I like to come up with some tactics, but I don't see any great tactics at the moment. Knight takes looks a little bit too crazy. But let's slide the queen over. Introduce some ideas of some tactics. Okay, let's pin that knight. Now there's some tactics. Come back here, and the idea is to get the queen all the way onto this square. What do we want to take with the bishop? Probably the knight. Looks like I froze there for a second. Not sure what that was about. Okay, so the bishop comes there to stop those ideas. So now I'm looking at bishop takes, something takes, queen down. Looks threatening. Okay, so bishop here threatening checkmate. Queen check, king up, bishop check, pawn up. Nope, can't go that way. Have to go knight check here. He runs here. Not quite convincing. Let's start with this. 25 seconds left. Gotta just play at this point. I can't block with the pawn because I can just take it with the bishop. And then queen here, and queen check. We got it. Okay. Last game of the match. Let's see what he plays here. Caro-Kann, okay? All right. Let's advance. And let's have some fun. I think I push, so I can play knight to f4. Seems unusual. Okay, let's go knight f4. I can't imagine he can get away with queen g5. That seems too crazy with all the discoveries. Wow. He says he can. Okay. Let's think here. I take here. He goes somewhere. I do something. Okay, so there. And I can even just come back with all the same ideas, same threats. Okay, I feel like I'm forced to take there. Guess I'll just go right back and push e6 at some point. Queen f3 I know is an idea. I'm not worried about the c2 pawn. I doubt that's going to make or break this game. Bishop e3 to block the file, I think, will make the most sense. We're already getting under some time pressure, and it is still the opening. Okay, let's play rook g1. Just to stop anything from happening on g4. I know I don't usually Not usually supposed to castle queenside or castle at all, but maybe it'll make sense to here. Maybe I just step the king up and bring the rook to the e file. Let's live large. Okay, that looks like a mistake because now I can just play e6, I think. Okay. Take there. Down a pawn. Oh, and he's just going to go to the other side of the board. I forgot he could still do that. But I think I win some material with this move. Feels like his king is the one in trouble here. Okay. We can win the exchange still. Hit the queen. I know bishop h3 is often an idea, but I think this tempo is going to be pretty strong in this position. Uh-huh. Of course, if I drop my queen, that doesn't help. I should have played the rook down first. Oh, that's a painful way to go here. Oh, it was such a nice position, too. Wow. All right, so the match ends up in a tie after that, 4-4. So, well done to my opponent, Playlionchess. If you haven't followed his channel, you should go ahead and do so. And we will definitely be having a rematch in the future because these were 8 very even games. It was a lot of fun. Hopefully you guys enjoy.